If you love ghosts, cryptids, UFOs, and everything that goes bump in the night, then mark your calendars for the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo, happening September 26 in Mayfield, Kentucky at the Mayfield Graves County Fairgrounds. This incredible one-day event brings together some of the biggest names in the paranormal community, including Aaron G. Thompson from Netflix's 28 Days Haunted, Jimmy and Jeffrey from Outlaw Paranormal, The Wind of Rose, Josh Morris, Michael Huntington, Rachel Ravensville, and many, many more special guests and speakers. Your admission is just $15, and that gets you an all-day come-and-go wristband so you can explore at your own pace. Browse more than 35 vendors, enjoy delicious food trucks, attend speaker presentations and panels, meet investigators, hear incredible stories, and dive into the worlds of hauntings, cryptids, UFOs, and the unexplained. Whether you're a seasoned ghost hunter or just curious about the mysteries that surround us, there's something for everyone at the West Kentucky Paranormal Expo. Tickets are on sale now. For more information, visit West Kentucky Paranormal Expo on Facebook and get ready for one of the most exciting paranormal events of the year. We'll see you in Mayfield on September 26th. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm the American historian, Allen Sircy. There are some places where history feels close. You walk through the front door, admire the architecture, glance at the photographs hanging on the walls, and you know generations of people have passed through the same hallways. Presidents, celebrities, businessmen, soldiers, newlyweds. Their stories linger long after they're gone. And then there's places where history doesn't just linger. It seems to wait. The Congress Plaza Hotel in Chicago has carried that reputation for generations. It's been there since 1893. Guests have reported hearing footsteps in empty hallways, voices drifting from vacant rooms, and shadowy figures disappearing around corners where no one could possibly have gone. Staff members have spoken of phantom children laughing in deserted corridors, unexplained piano music echoing through empty ballrooms, and hotel rooms that have sent frightened guests to the front desk in the middle of the night asking to be moved to a different room. For more than a century, stories like these have become woven into the hotel's history. And considering everything that's happened within these walls, perhaps it's not surprising. The Congress Plaza has been the scene of mysterious deaths, heartbreaking suicides, fatal accidents, and violent killings stretching back to its earliest days. Every hallway seems to hold another tragedy. Every floor another story of lives that ended far too soon. And among all these stories, one really stands apart. It isn't about a murderer. It's not about a famous gangster. It isn't even about one of the hotel's many unexplained deaths. It's about a little boy. Employees have claimed for decades that somewhere along the 12th floor, laughter echoes through the corridor long after midnight. Tiny footsteps race behind them, only to stop the moment they turn around. Some believe they're hearing the ghost of a 4-year-old child. And if that's true, his story didn't begin in Chicago. It began nearly 5,000 miles away, in Prague. And by the late 1930s, Europe stood on the edge of catastrophe. Across Germany, Adolf Hitler had risen to power, and one by one neighboring territories were being swallowed into the expanding Third Reich. In March of 1939, German troops marched into what remained of Czechoslovakia, occupying Prague and tightening their grip on the country. For Jewish families and for many others viewed as political or racial enemies of the Nazi regime, remaining meant living under growing persecution and uncertainty. Leaving meant abandoning everything. And one of those families was the Langers. Karel Langer had spent years building a successful life. He owned a textile company, reportedly one of the largest textile manufacturers in Czechoslovakia. By every measure, he had achieved the kind of success most people spend a lifetime chasing. He and his wife Adele had been married for 18 years. And together they were raising 2 boys, 6-year-old Karel Tommy and 4-year-old Jan Misha. By all accounts, they were an ordinary family living an extraordinary life. Then history intervened. As Nazi occupation became inevitable, Carell realized he had almost no time left. If he stayed, there was a real possibility the government would seize everything. So he made an impossible decision. He sold his company, not for what it was worth, but for whatever he could get. Years of work, gone, almost overnight. Millions of dollars in value vanished. He took pennies on the dollar simply because walking away with something was better than losing everything. The family packed what they could carry. And when they finally left Europe, they reportedly had only $7,000 remaining. That money represented their entire future, their home, their livelihood, their dreams. Reduced to a few $1,000s in cash in the hope that somewhere else life could begin again. On July 1st, 1939, the Langer family arrived in Chicago on temporary visas. Adele had 2 aunts living in the city, making it one of the few places where they had any kind of support. But surviving and starting over, they're 2 different things. The family rented a modest basement apartment on Chicago's west side. It was a dramatic change from the comfortable life they left behind. Carell immediately began trying to rebuild. He contacted business associates in Canada. Friends in Hamilton, Ontario believed they might help him establish another textile company if he could obtain permission to come there. Letters were exchanged, applications were submitted, and every day became an exercise in waiting. Waiting for paperwork, waiting for permission, waiting for another chance. For Carell, hope remained alive. For Adele, hope seemed to be slipping away. She left behind nearly everyone she knew. She couldn't speak English. She barely understood the people around her. Everything familiar had disappeared. The streets, the language, the customs, even the smell of home. Imagine fleeing your country believing you're saving your children, only to wake up every morning in a strange city where you can't communicate with anybody. Historians often talk about refugees escaping war. They don't always talk about what comes next, the loneliness, the isolation, the grief. Friends later recalled that Adele became deeply depressed. She constantly spoke about Prague. She missed her family. She missed her home. And as the weeks passed by, her despair reportedly became darker. She began speaking about ending her own life, and tragically, taking her children with her. Whether those around her recognized the seriousness of those statements, we'll never know. Well, then came the morning of August 3rd, 1939. Adele seemed quieter than usual. She told Carell she wanted to take the boys to the zoo. Nothing about their request seemed unusual. Perhaps she simply wanted them to have a nice day together. Carell hugged both of his sons. He kissed them goodbye. He told them to enjoy seeing the animals. It was no big deal. It was a regular farewell, the kind of parents make every day without realizing it will be the last. After his family left, Carell remained at the apartment. And not long afterward, a letter arrived from Canada. It was from immigration authorities. He had been approved. The answer he'd been waiting weeks to receive had finally come. His family could move to Canada. He could rebuild his business. There'd be another chance. One can only imagine the excitement that rushed through him. He couldn't wait to tell Adele everything was going to be all right. Except, hours passed. She didn't come home. Afternoon became evening. Evening became night. And a quiet feeling of unease began settling over him. He had no idea. And while he sat waiting with wonderful news, his family was somewhere else entirely. At approximately 5 o'clock that afternoon, Adele checked into the Congress Plaza Hotel. She checked into room 1234, high above Michigan Avenue, on the 12th floor. She brought both boys upstairs, changed them to their pajamas, and tucked them into bed. What happened during those next few hours, only Adele ever knew. Perhaps she looked out across Grant Park towards Lake Michigan. Perhaps she thought about Prague. Maybe she wondered if she'd ever see home again. No one knows for sure. But sometime after the sun went down, she made her decision. She lifted 4-year-old Jan from the bed where he had slept, carried him to the open window, and let him fall into the night. She then walked back across the room, picked up 6-year-old Tommy, held him one last time, and then released him as well. Afterward, she went to the bathroom. Using a razor blade, she cut her left wrist, then returned to the same window and jumped. At approximately 9 o'clock that evening, Park policeman William Ganud stood along Michigan Avenue when an unfamiliar sound shattered the night. He later reported comparing it to heavy pumpkins striking pavement. Confused, the officer walked toward Congress Plaza. And what he discovered would remain with him forever. A woman, 2 small boys, broken on the sidewalk below. Blood flowed from the woman's wrist. Officer Gannot immediately realized she was beyond help. But perhaps the children still lived. He rushed them to the hospital. Doctors took one look. There was nothing they could do. Both boys were dead. Police traced the registration back to room 1234, and then they began searching for the husband. Around 9 that evening, detectives found Adel Langer outside his apartment. Witnesses said he was pacing nervously back and forth. He couldn't understand why his family hadn't returned. And the officers quickly realized he spoke almost no English. Unable to explain what had happened, they brought him to the police station while an interpreter was located. And the detectives faced another problem. They learned Adel suffered from heart trouble. How do you tell a man that within a single afternoon, he'd lost his wife, both of his children? In the future, he'd sacrificed everything to save. Finally, around 11 o'clock, an interpreter entered the room. He explained what had happened. Adel screamed. He collapsed to the floor and then slowly pulled himself together. Without speaking another word, he drew a finger to his throat. Tomorrow, me, this. The officers understood immediately. He intended to end his own life. They placed him into protective custody overnight until friends could take him home the following morning. A few days later, Adele, Tommy, and little Jan were buried in Bohemian National Cemetery. More than 10,000 mourners reportedly attended the funeral. Among them was Vojta Benes, the brother of former Czechoslovakia President Edward Benes. As the service came to a close, enormous crowds sang the Czech national anthem. And translated into English, the song is called, get this, Where is My Home? For thousands of grieving refugees, the song carried unimaginable weight. Home was gone. Some would never see it again. Now, Adel eventually rebuilt his life, and years later he remarried. He moved to California and lived until 1972. History records he survived. But surviving, it's not always the same thing as healing. Today, more than 80 years later, the Langer tragedy has become intertwined with the folklore of the Congress Plaza Hotel. Employees have long claimed they hear what sounds like a young child laughing along the 12th floor. Housekeepers have described hearing tiny footsteps running behind them before the hallways suddenly fall silent. And one longtime employee reportedly said, I've never seen him, but I've heard him. You hear a little boy laughing behind you, and when you turn around, there's nobody there. Among the most frequently reported stories come from a veteran security guard known as Johnny D. Now, according to him, while making his nightly rounds in 2018, he noticed what appeared to be a young boy standing there in the hallway. The child wore old-fashioned knickerbocker pants. Johnny called out, "Can I help you?" The boy didn't answer, so Johnny called again. Slowly, the child turned around. Now, Johnny later described a pale face framed by dark circles beneath the eyes. As he stepped closer, the hallway suddenly felt much colder. The child looked directly at him. And then, according to Johnny, he vanished. Over the years, paranormal investigators who've been there in the hotel suggest the little boy, he wasn't there trying to frighten anyone. He was searching for his parents, searching for the family he lost, searching for the home he would never see again. If you want to learn more about the haunted history of Chicago, check out my book, Ghost Stories in Graveyard Tales, Chicago. Lots of great stories in the Windy City. In the Congress Plaza, that's just one of many, many ghost stories there. Over a dozen people committed suicide in the old hotel. And did you know in Chicago there's a Frankenstein story? If you guys have read my books and listened to podcasts, you know a good Frankenstein story is always just right up my alley. So it's called The Gentleman Burglar. I did a podcast on that last year. But anyway, check out the book, Ghost Stories, Graveyard Tales, Chicago, man. There's so many great stories there. I love Chicago. I need to go back there and get one of those big deep dish pizzas. There's a deep dish pizza place here in Nashville, but it's not quite as good as what I get in Chicago. Anyway, so hey, we're trying to reach 150 Apple Podcast reviews and 100 Spotify reviews before Halloween. If you've enjoyed the show, take 45 seconds and leave a review. Those really help people discover the show. Apple uses ratings and reviews to decide which shows to recommend. Quick review helps other people who love folklore and haunted history find the show. And have you guys been to Monster City Madhouse yet? MonsterCityMadhouse.com. The new shirt, man, it's a whole lot of fun. Gravestone. Features a mashup of Tombstone and the Universal Monsters. This Monster City Madhouse exclusive shirt is made from a comfortable 60/40 polyester cotton blend with quotes like, "I'm your Huckleberry," and "Hell's coming with me." You'll be ready to unleash monster justice. And go to MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Use promo code SAVE10. That's right, promo code SAVE10 at MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Get you 10% off your order. I was at a show a few weeks ago in Knoxville, and I saw a handful of folks walking around wearing this Gravestone shirt. It's really, really popular, so go check it out. I've got some appearances coming up in October. I'll be at Scarefest in Lexington, Kentucky, and a few others, still working on that. I'll make some announcements in a few weeks with all the details. And speaking of announcements, I have some new books dropping next month, and I'll be announcing those next week. So stay tuned. On Thursday, I'm going to make an announcement on that. And be sure to like Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook, Instagram, and send us questions on our socials for future Q&A episodes. You can also send the questions to southernghoststories@gmail.com. I got an email set up just for the Q&As. And check out Tennessee Hauntings on Facebook. It's a group I run. It's got like 20-something thousand followers. We had over 500,000 views the past 2 weeks. Stories I post just about wild Tennessee folklore. But it's Tennessee Hauntings on Facebook, so check that out. Well, man, I'm done for today. Thank you guys for listening to Southern Ghost Stories. I'm Allen Sircy, the American Haunt Historian, and I'll see you guys back on Monday from the Vault episode. If you love ghost stories, folklore, and all things mysterious, you need to make a trip to Haunted in downtown Tullahoma, Tennessee. Just a short drive from Nashville, this family-owned Gothic shop is filled with the strange, unusual, and downright fascinating. This isn't a big box store full of mass-produced decorations. Haunted specializes in handmade curiosities, Gothic decor, metaphysical supplies, green witchcraft essentials, and unique pieces created by independent artists. Whether you're decorating or just looking for something you won't find anywhere else, Haunted is worth the trip. Visit them on 125 West Lincoln Street in Tullahoma, or shop online at hauntedstore.net. That's right, hauntedstore.net. Haunted, curated for the strange and unusual. Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available.